You're watching the New Stack Makers, a podcast for people who develop, deploy, and manage at-scale software. For more information and articles about at-scale technologies, please visit thenewstack.io. Now enjoy the show. Hey everyone, we're here today to talk about distributed ledger technologies. And with me is Andrew Aitken. He's the Chief Open Source Officer at Hedera, which is a fully open source public distributed ledger, and Dr. Leemon Baird, who's the inventor of Hashgraph consensus. And so I'd love to just start off with the status of open source in the Web3 world, which is really blockchain, I think. Blockchain, I think as you were noting in your keynote, has had this reputation with it, with art that serves as blockchain. And there's some purposes for that, I think, for artists, individuals, but it turned into something much different. And now you're calling what you're developing kind of like seems like it's almost like a network, but I'm curious on what you mean by network, because in open source, a network can be open, it can be closed, but in your world, I think we're not talking about the workloads on the network itself. It sounds like more like we're talking about the blockchain network itself. Am I wrong in that?
Yeah, so a blockchain is a network. It's a bunch of computers.
Yeah.
And they're all running open source software, and they're talking to each other and coming to an agreement. And so they agree on who has done what transactions and what was the result of those transactions.
Okay.
So if I give you a token, they all agree, yes, the token did transfer, or they all agree, no, it didn't transfer.
Right.
So it is a network, and they're running open source software.
Okay. But it's not necessarily like it's not a network that manages application workloads.
Well, there's these little applications called smart contracts that run on top of it.
Okay.
And so they do that too.
Those are the workloads.
I don't know what workload is. Part of the workload is that you get to transfer tokens. Part of it is you get to record things. Part of it is you run these little tiny programs called smart contracts.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, different workloads can vary in size and, in context and everything else. And so that's kind of what I was thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
So in that construct, it may not be a workload from your perspective, but
Right.
there are certainly different types of applications that run on top of the network also, embodied in smart contracts. You can have different exchanges, you have different oracles, you have different wallets that will run and transact with the network. But back to one of your part of your first question, the, open source and Web3. And what's important to understand, I think, is that almost all the blockchains, I think we can say all blockchains and distributed ledger technologies are foundationally open source, right? The code that they're made from is open source. Where there's a bit of difference is the applications that run on top. Some are open source and some are proprietary today. So that's where there may be a little bit of difference.
And what is yours then?
So we have an open source ledger. The blockchain is open source. You could think of it like an operating system that's open source, and you can run programs on top of it that are open source. You can run programs on top of it that are not open source.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But what we build, the layer we build, is open source.
Right. And so tell me how you built it. What did you build?
Yeah. So first we had to come up with an algorithm for how they're going to talk to each other and come to an agreement. And so that's the Hashgraph algorithm, and it has some advantages. It's more secure, and it's very fast and very efficient. And
How did you make it fast? How did you make it efficient?
It's all in the math.
Yeah.
It's actually asynchronous Byzantine fault tolerant, which is just the very highest level of security. And it's designed in a way that it's basically as fast as the internet would allow. It's actually pretty fun.
I'm going to get geeky.
Yeah.
So how do you make it as fast as the internet can allow? What does the internet allow?
So the transactions that all the computers are going to agree on, of course, each computer has to receive it and and on average will have to send it once.
Right.
So in a good gossip protocol, we end up having every transaction is just sent and received once. And then there's a tiny bit of extra bytes added to the end, just 2 hashes. And that's it. So we're using the very bare minimum you could possibly do is, well, all these transactions have to get to everybody. On top of that, we're adding, 1% or less extra bytes. And that's it. There is no other communication between the nodes, between the computers to come to an agreement. Just those two little hashes are enough for them to totally come to agreement on whether the transactions worked or didn't work and in what order they're in. Everything you just get for free if you set it up the right way.
So it has all the consensus built into it?
All built into it. Yeah.
Okay.
That is the process of how it comes to consensus. And when he talks about it's as fast as the internet, well, we know that there are certainly bandwidth limitations and other, that's where the limit to our protocol comes in play, is based on bandwidth issues and other types of issues that we all face. Right.
Okay. So when did it get developed?
So in 2015, I finally solved the math problem to make it work. I just been doing it for fun. I like to work on math problems. And this is one I've been working on for years. And, I'd work on it for a while and just realize it's impossible and set it aside. And
Was that the fault tolerant aspect of the equation?
yeah, I wanted it to be Byzantine fault tolerant and, in fact, asynchronous. That means really secure. But I also wanted it to be fast. And I kept convincing myself you can't have both at once for years. And then in 2015, I realized, just add the 2 hashes and you get both at the same time.
Is it amazing?
That was amazing. It was really fun.
What 2 little hashes can do? Sounds like a song.
It does. It does.
What 2 little hashes can do? Anyway, so 2015 it emerged, and then there's other open source distributions out there. How does yours? What were some of the, what did the landscape look like then in terms of open source with distributed ledgers?
So in a lot of ways, it looked like now where there are other ledgers, but they don't have the ABFT security. They don't have some of the properties that we have, and they don't have good governance. And we really wanted to have governance that's guaranteed to have checks and balances and distribution and decentralization from the beginning. And that is something you don't see elsewhere.
Okay, so tell me about that governance. What is that governance that you developed, and how has it helped you maintain the distributed ledger technology?
Exactly. So you could imagine that we just say we'll have an anarchy. There is no governance. Anyone who wants to contribute can help control it, and the whole world, 8 billion people, can help control it. Well, what happens over time is it narrows down, and you end up with 5 people that actually do the controlling. That's just kind of how it evolves. What we said from the beginning is, no, we're going to have a wide range of very big organizations, big universities, big companies. We have 32 of them. And they will jointly govern it, and they act as checks and balances on each other. And they're spread around the world. They're on every continent except Antarctica. There's universities, there's companies, people that are large and have a reputation to protect. And then whenever they get together and make their decisions, they publish the minutes. It's very transparent. And you know that it's not going to collapse down to just 5 people that have all the power and do it in the back rooms and you don't know what they're doing. Kind of set that in from the beginning. You have separation of powers from the very beginning. That's the way we did it.
Where did you get that learning from? Like what led you to that approach?
It's interesting. We had many sources of inspiration. One of the biggest ones was the Visa network. So Visa cards, the credit card, was originally just a bunch of banks that got together to do this, but they wanted to set it up where no one person was in power, where you had lots of different parties that all had equal vote and all were controlling it. And we actually took a lot of inspiration from the way they set up the Visa network.
Well, why did you want to do it in that manner in the first place? What was it in your mind? Were you looking for something like Visa, or were you just building it and thinking, like, we need to make this more distributed and more, more democratic? And what was the impetus for kind of that work before you found Visa?
Really, it's the latter. We want something people can trust. Now, to be trustworthy, you need to have the magic math that makes it ABFT. That helps. But if it's not governed well, you can't trust. The math can't save you. If it's governed by a handful of people and they're dishonest, you're out of luck. We really wanted the governance to be from the beginning that way. And the computers themselves, of course, are run by different people, but we wanted the governance of the code base that ends up on those computers to also be decentralized.
And so in that decentralization, you were able to build the technology, the hash consensus. And so 2015, 2016, now we're 2024. What have been some of the milestones since 2015?
There's been a lot of things. So we have this council of 32 organizations. We started with just 5 and grew from there. That has been fun. It wasn't originally obvious that you'd even be able to get large names like top 10 universities in the world and names like IBM or Google or LG Electronics or the biggest bank in Africa. We got all that eventually. It was amazing to me. Recently, we had Mendeley's join, who's no one's ever heard of, but they're brands we've heard of. Oreo cookies and Toblerone chocolate and Ritz crackers and everything. So that's been a big milestone. We've added new features as the community has come together and asked for new features and debated what they should look like and come up with what those features should be. We've added lots of new features. We didn't originally have the token service. Originally, you could have smart contracts, little programs that do your tokens, but we added a separate service just for that. That was a big thing that we added. The consensus service, which allows you to store information, all sorts of things.
So, Andrew, what's your job then, in helping this distributed ledger technology become more fully open source?
Well, I think that's a really good question. So one of the key milestones is obviously when the whole technology was actually made open source and put underneath the Apache license. So I've been here now for 7 months. And my role, my charter, is to help grow an ecosystem of contributors to the network and ensure that we are operating essentially by open source best practices. We want to be, not only do we want to be very decentralized from a government perspective and be very transparent in our governance, but we also want to be transparent in how the software itself is built and maintained. So transparency, meritocracy, some of the key aspects of open source are what we are further instilling in how we govern the software. But at the end of the day, we need to build a bigger ecosystem. We need more people building more apps running on our network. And so that's a big reason of why we're really investing in growing our open source ecosystem.
So so the infrastructure is well established. Now you're trying to focus now on the application level to bring people to build apps on top of it.
And we've got great apps running today. We want more of them.
Well, more like how many? What kind of? I mean, you gave some use cases today in the keynote. There's banks. There's there's very big companies who are, in the labeling and printing business and such. But what are the other what is it you're looking for? We can just say applications, but I'm trying to get an idea of how you're trying to build that community. Who are you looking for? What do you want that ecosystem to look like?
Right. So for example, we have some great wallets that are built to run on, that are optimized for our network. But we also need to have more wallets. We need to have more exchange capabilities. We are EVM, which is Ethereum equivalent today, but we need to really be able to ensure that we are truly cross-chain. This is the best way to explain it. So we need more applications that facilitate that. So it's a whole host or set of applications that we want to continue to grow. And we want our council members who are deeply involved and committed to the success of the network to begin to more fully participate in the community. We have some great contributions, but we need to broaden that also.
Is that a maintenance issue?
It's not just maintenance. It is important that we eat our own dog food. And so these council members, they have some amazing things they're building on the network. We want more of that.
Yep.
Because the more that we're building on it, then we also see what needs to be built. It also shows the world what can be built. And so we have, the things I talked about this morning, some of those were council members. Several of those were council members. And so you're talking about that. That's great. We like other people building cool applications on top. And then we also have these sort of middleware enabling things like the wallets and the exchanges and so on.
Yes.
The infrastructure. So you have the network itself, it's like an operating system. And then you have that infrastructure layer, and then you have the apps on top of that. And we're looking at the whole stack.
Yeah. And the other piece, one of the other messages I gave today is it's really important for us to not only grow our own ecosystem, but to participate in the broader ecosystem. We're already pretty deeply engaged in a number of different activities in Web3, but there are a lot of infrastructure projects such as Open Wallet Foundation or Hyperledger or Distributed Identity Foundation. We want to be known for best practices in software security development. That's why we've also recently joined OpenSSF. Right? So not only do we need to build our own ecosystem around our platform, but we need to be embedded and actively contribute in the broader open source ecosystem.
So Web3 and open source, how would you characterize it today?
So Again, almost all the underlying technology is built on open source and open source. One of the differences, though, and I'll be very, very direct, is some of these application providers don't really understand why they should be open sourcing their own software. They consume open source, they build on open source, but they build proprietary applications. And frankly, I'm having conversations in Web3 today that I had in Web2 10 years ago about how to commercialize, how to make money from open source software. And so a part of our activities is actually providing that level of support, not just this technical support, not just great documentation and great libraries and great SDKs and APIs. It's also helping provide the education and to help these app builders understand why and how there are commercial opportunities for them by open sourcing their software.
What do you find resonates with them? Because we all know here at a conference like this that there's all kinds of open source components that you might use in your technology, and then you differentiate based upon that.
Right.
But there's also security issues that come with open source, right?
Absolutely.
And you can have more eyes on it and such. Linus talked about that today. Just randomly, malicious actions are discovered, but it's really the community that does it, right?
So one thing that Leemon has pointed out in the presentation is that we feel we're in blockchain or DLT 2.0, and it's about practical use cases. And we gave some great examples earlier. And as more and more of those practical use cases are built, many of them are going to be targeted at the enterprise. And the enterprise, in order to sell your software or to get an enterprise to adopt your software, your platform, they have very, very stringent security requirements. And so part of what we're also going to be doing is educating our ecosystem and help them prepare to actually engage with the enterprise.
And the funny thing is, enterprises require security. Maybe consumers don't know enough to require security. We need it for them too. So we need security for the people that are asking for it, and we need security for the people that don't know to ask for it. That really is important.
Yeah.
And so we have a lot of those sorts of apps too. Karate Combat is a game being built on us. But we need security there too, because there's a lot of scams out there. And we just need security across the board.
Yep.
So what's next for your company and for the technology?
We are growing so rapidly. There are more features that we're putting in. The community is really thriving on saying what features they want, and then the debate on what the feature will look like, and then the feature gets implemented.
What are some new features?
Making airdrops. This is a really interesting one. This is a real thing that's been debated recently, is what if I want to give you a token? Should I need your permission for that or not? Or can I just send you a token you might not want? And if I send you one you don't want, do you have a way to refuse it? And are you legally obligated to the IRS of having received it before you refuse it? All those questions. Most ledgers just say, yeah, fine, you can spam people with whatever you want. What we're doing is giving the user the control that says, I want to be spammed, or I don't want to be spammed, or I want to be spammed only in this way and not in this way. And so the feature ended up being really complex.
Because they make it send you all kinds of coins.
Exactly.
And it happens.
It happens. And the IRS has even said, when you do something like that, you owe taxes on the thing you didn't even know you received.
Yep.
So they have to count it as an asset because it is an asset.
Exactly. So the community came together and ended up developing a very beautiful solution to this, where you have very fine-grained control over exactly what kinds of spam you want and which ones you don't. So you have low friction, but you also have power.
And
Very
that's
interesting.
That whole perspective is one that sets us apart. Because I was at one of my first Web3 conferences was at Ethereum Denver a couple of months ago. 25, 30,000 people, right? And I'll bet there were 20 presentations on airdrops. And I don't remember a single one of them talking about giving the user the actual fine-grained control. It was about how do we as a company drop coins on a whole bunch of people. That was every presentation I saw. Whereas we want to have the capability to do that, but we want to give the user the knowledge and the control to accept or not accept.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's why it's important to have the community. If it's only the companies that are doing airdrops that control the feature, then you get no protections. But if the community is controlling the feature, then you get the power and the safety.
Yep.
That's where it comes from.
So it gives you a lot of opportunity to, take blockchain to another level. But blockchain has suffered from some identity issues, right? And it seems like now we're coming into another hype cycle with AI. But I have to ask, what's the intersection there with blockchain and AI?
Great question. And you are so right about the hype cycle.
Yeah.
Okay. So blockchain had a hype cycle that was saying crazy things, and now we're over the hump and we're in the actually using it for real world things. Okay, AI is way back in the hype stage right now. But in the long run, it will be very useful, I think. And my background was actually AI.
Yeah.
What's the intersection? One part of it is we have these models, LLMs and things that are trained with AI, and they have biases, and they have false data that's being used to train them, and they're only as good as their training data. So when you're going to use an AI system, you need to know what was the training data used for it. And I mentioned that this morning with Equity Lab doing that, where you can then trace back to exactly what data went into this thing, because you can't read its mind. That's one of the things about LLMs, it's just a bunch of weights in a neural network. You don't know what it means. All you can do is look at the training data, and you want to have cryptographic proofs that this was the training data and it's been digitally signed off. That's part of the intersection. Today, there's another intersection I think that we're going to be getting to as the world catches up. Everybody's using data they scraped off the web. Maybe they don't have permission for it. Maybe they owe royalties. Maybe they don't even know who to pay the royalties to. And the medical community has been building on Hedera already to allow people to say, here's my medical data, here's which medical studies I'm allowing it to be used in, here's which ones I'm not allowing it to be used in, I've given you permission and now I want to retract permission. All of that, we need to bring that now to AI. I give you permission to use my data to train your AI, and maybe I get paid 1/100 of a penny every time your AI charges something. I get royalties, and I want to have the right to then remove my permissioning, all of that stuff. Ledgers are good for that too. So all the things that were built on Hedera for medical
So it
could be
allows
used
for
for
that
that.
granular attribution.
Exactly. Granular attribution and granular payments. I can't really write you a check for 1/100 of a cent. That doesn't really work. I'll pay far more than what I'm giving you just in the paper and in the mailing. But I can do it with a ledger. I can send you cryptocurrency, USDC or something, which is cryptocurrency, to pay you 1/100 of a cent. I could do that. That's the future also of the intersection between the two.
And what's the future of open source, do you think, in the community?
So I think all the underlying technology is absolutely going to continue to be open source. And hopefully through our efforts, we'll be able to bring more and more of those application developers to the open source ecosystem. And at the same time, ensure that they're building in a safe, secure environment.
Thank you both for taking the time to talk today.
Oh, thank you. It's
Absolutely.
been great to talk with you.
Thank you.
If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, you can always subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're on all the major social media platforms. You can always find us at thenewstack.io. We hope to see you soon.